I'm the daughter of the late Congressman Tom Lantos, who, as some of you may recall, was the only Holocaust survivor ever elected to serve in the United States Congress. And he brought that unique and searing perspective of the events of his life to everything he did in the Congress. And so I always feel both very privileged and lucky, but also very much at home when I am given the great thrill of being part of the Anne Frank Award ceremony.
We must remember the atrocities of the past so we can prevent similar horrors in the future. And I take this seriously as a Dutch ambassador, obviously, but also as a Dutchman who grew up in a nation that lived through these horrors and had to rebuild our country during a devastating war.
Anne Frank said, and I quote, I'm sure not for the first or last time this morning, "Human greatness does not lie in wealth or power, but in character and goodness." And I cannot imagine a more fitting message that embodies Congresswoman Lowey's spirit and conviction. It is her character and goodness that we are all so grateful for.
Nita's one of the most sincere and gracious people with whom I've had the pleasure to work. But don't let her good manners and lovely smile fool you. She's tough as nails. Yet, as formidable and fierce as the chairwoman could be in fighting for her constituents, she's also a very modest person. I learned this first when a publication called In Style magazine released a list of the 50 most badass women of the year. I assured her that in Texas, being called a badass is as good a compliment as you can possibly get. Now, I've given a lot of speeches, but I must say I am so moved. Forgive me if I am finding it difficult to express my appreciation. This really is special for me. First, I want to thank Ambassador Haspels for your kind introduction. Please convey my deep appreciation for this award to your government in The Hague and to the members of the advisory committee. I am humbled and extremely grateful to be selected for this honor. Imagine if every middle school student in this country had a unit in their world history class that read and discussed the diary of Anne Frank. As we tragically lose the last generation of Holocaust survivors, Anne's first-hand account of the horrors of persecution, Anne's truth, become an even greater legacy.
Amnon Weinstein has spent the last 2 decades locating and restoring violins that were played by Jewish musicians during the Holocaust. Although most of the musicians who originally played the instruments were silenced by the Holocaust, their voices and spirits live on through the violins that Amnon has lovingly restored. Avshi Weinstein is with us today to accept the Anne Frank Special Recognition Award on behalf of his father, Amnon Weinstein. Earlier, I spoke about my mother, Joyce Vanderveen, and I told you how she fled during the war and that the only thing she brought with her was her violin, which never left her side. Avshi, for all the good work that Violins of Hope does, for your ongoing commitment to tell the stories of these violins and their owners. I would like to donate my mother's violin to your collection. I can think of no better home for it, and I trust that in your capable hands, it will be cared for, played, and most importantly, that my mother's story and legacy will live on. Her violin has a shared history with the other violins in your collection, and I believe this is something that would have made my mother very happy.
The best way for us to try and make sure that whatever happened will not happen again is by education. And one of the things that we are doing when we have a project of Violins of Hope, we try to go to schools, to as many schools as we can, all around the country. I think I've seen probably over 150, maybe even 200,000 students in places that probably never seen a Jewish person in their life. Some of them probably never heard about the Holocaust. But we try to bring them the stories of the individual people who suffered during the war.
I deeply appreciate the invitation to participate in this tribute to Violins of Hope and to introduce the 3 violins that share a connection to my native country, the Netherlands. Like these violins, I am a survivor of the Holocaust, and like these violins, I bear witness to both the unspeakable cruelty and to the all too rare but forever inspiring acts of kindness and heroism that define the Holocaust. I survived because the Dutch-Indonesian Matna family and their Indonesian nanny, Mima Saina, risked their lives to save a 9-month-old Jewish baby. My father's violin also survived, and my mother presented it to the Matna family as a gift for saving my life.
Now, I really recently had the pleasure of hosting a class of 4th graders on Capitol Hill to teach them the history of the Anne Frank tree, which was right in front of the sapling that I sponsored in 2014. It's now a sprawling tree. I encourage you, if you have a chance, to walk around the west front of the Capitol and go see it. It creates more opportunities for hope and understanding. And I shared with that 4th grade class the history of that chestnut and its saplings, which have now been planted across the globe and many across the country here in the U.S. as a promise of freedom and a symbol of hope. And we must tell Anne Frank's story to the younger generation to make sure that each generation understands that if we let our guard down, hatred will again rear its ugly head.
As we carry on the fight against the dark forces of hate, we remember what Anne Frank wrote in her diary. A single candle can both defy and define the darkness. Nita, your leadership has helped light the way for a more peaceful future. Thank you. And you constantly remind us that we all have a role to play in building a world where difference is not tolerated, but welcomed and celebrated.